Well, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Sunderland Minster for this very special evening together. It doesn't seem so very long since some of us might have been here as members of the Heaven branch of SAFC to remember loved ones just before Christmas. And again, today we gather to remember someone who has a very special place in everybody's hearts. It's good to be here. Well done for braving the terrible weather. And it's good also to be online, so people who miss the service can always watch it on the Minster Facebook page because it's being live streamed as we go through. So please make yourselves at home. It's really good as the Minster Church at the heart of the city of Sunderland to welcome you here tonight as we remember a son of Sunderland, Gary Rowell. I'm going to hand over now to Joanne Youngson.
Hiya everybody. So last May, we gathered here in this very same wonderful venue to remember our King Charlie Hurley. And what we discovered is that our community benefited from it in coming together at a very sad time for our football club. So today we gather to remember the great Gary Rowell. And on behalf of the Heaven branch, we want to thank Club Chaplain Father Mark for always being here and supporting us. Also our speakers, all friends of Gary, club historian Rob Mason, commentator Simon Crabtree, and former player Barry Dunn. Also, thank you to Joseph O'Neill for providing us with some lovely music. And lastly, to Gary's family, who has supported us gathering here today. So I'll hand you over now to Father Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. And Happy New Year. It's not too late to say Happy New Year, I hope. And we gather as a community tonight to remember Gary and to pray for him, and particularly for his sons, Chris and Peter, who we keep especially in our prayers tonight. We gather in this special place. The Minster has always been a place of prayer and a place of gathering where people of Sunderland have shed tears and shared their joys together. And we do tonight. Yes, there's sadness in our meeting that one of us is no longer physically amongst us again, but Gary always will be in our hearts, and we remember him with love and affection this evening. So let's just take a moment to centre ourselves in this place of worship. Let's just quieten our hearts. And let's prepare to celebrate a life well lived, a great servant of our community. With joyful hearts, let's reflect on Gary's life. And Rob is going to share a few thoughts with us.
Good evening. And my name's Rob Mason. I'm a club historian at Sunderland Football Club. I saw Gary play most of the games, maybe nearly all the games he played for Sunderland. I was very pleased and very proud to become a good friend of Gary's in later life. And I've been asked today to come along and talk to you in some detail about Gary's career. Simon and Barry, a little later, will talk a bit more about Gary as a person. But Gary was born in Seaham on the 6th of June 1957. His dad, Jack, had been a professional player at Sunderland in the 1950s for about 6 years, although never managed to do what Gary did and get a game for the first team. Gary was just 15 when he was first associated with Sunderland Football Club, signing for the club as a boy when he was just 15 on the 1st of July 1972. It was a dream come true for him to get that far, because first and foremost, Gary was an absolutely massive Sunderland fan. So much so that as a boy, and he was pretty much the same age as me, just a few months older, so much so that during the 1973 FA Cup run, Gary had a game to play for the youth team and rang in sick and said he was poorly so he could go and watch the first team play in the FA Cup. And told me I had to really watch myself because I was desperate that Bob Stokoe didn't see me and think, what are you doing here at the match when you should have been back playing for the youth team back at home? But that was Gary and how devoted he was as a supporter long before he became a player. He made his debut against Oxford at Roker Park as an 18-year-old. It was on the 13th of December 1975. Eerily, it was 50 years to the day before he actually passed away. Half a century the day before he passed away, there he was, as a teenager, as an 18-year-old, having that for any footballer, and we've got a lot of former footballers here, and if you speak to any of them and ask them about their first game, it will be indelibly printed on their memory. And so it was for Gary. But eerily, as I say, 50 years to the very day that he passed away. Gary, as I mentioned, was such a big fan of the team, and his heroes were firstly Charlie Hurley and equally the 1973 FA Cup winning team. And when Gary made his debut against Oxford United, there were 5 members of that 1973 Cup team that were his teammates: Jimmy Montgomery, Dick Malone, Bobby Kerr, Vic Hallam and Ian Porterfield. Gary came on as a substitute for a player called Mel Holden with about 20 minutes left. The score at the time he came on was 0-0. At the final whistle, Sunderland had won 1-0 and the scorer was Ian Porterfield, the same goal scorer as in the cup final. Another fairy tale come true for Gary, to be playing alongside half of these heroes and then have the same scoreline as in the cup final and with the same goal scorer. 3 months later, he made his second appearance. It was his first game as a start. It was away to Oldham Athletic. And a following month later, he got his second start and his first goal, scoring in a 4-1 win away to Hull City. Didn't take him long to get off the mark. He made another late season appearance that year at Blackpool. So come the end of the season, he'd started 3 games, come on as another game as a substitute and scored a goal. And that was a promotion season. It was a season, 1975-76, where Sunderland won the second division under Bob Stokoe. Bob Stokoe won 2 trophies as Sunderland manager, obviously the 73 Cup win. But then Gary had played a part in helping Bob Stokoe win the second trophy that Sunderland won under him. The following season, 1976-77, Bob Stokoe departed quite early on in the season and was replaced by a manager called Jimmy Adamson. To start with, Gary was just a young lad on the fringes of the side. Obviously, I've mentioned we'd been promoted, so we'd gone up to the top division, the equivalent of what the Premier League is now. And in the first part of the season, Gary was very much on the fringes, not like now where you can name 9 substitutes and put 5 on. Back in those days, there was just the 1 sub. And in the first 13 games of that season, Gary started twice, came off the bench another 2 times. But then, he got into the team, and in the last 29 games of the season, he played in all of them bar 1, and most of them were starts. The side struggled. At one point, they went 10 games without so much as scoring a goal. Obviously, bottom of the league, struggling really, really badly. And then in January 1977, something very famous happened. Some of you might have watched it. There was a new TV programme, a new TV series. It was called Charlie's Angels. 9 days after Charlie's Angels started on the television, 2 other of Gary's youth team members got their debut in a game against Wrexham, namely Sean Elliott and Kevin Arnott. All 3 of them, Arnott, Rowell and Elliott, had all been discovered by Sunderland's very, very famous scout Charlie Ferguson. And the 3 of them Rowell, Arnott and Elliott became known far and wide as Charlie's Angels, not least with the fact the TV programme had just started. Whether Gary was actually Farrah Fawcett or not, he's never quite admitted to me, but nonetheless they were Charlie's Angels. And they transformed the team. The team that had not scored a goal for 10 games and were rooted bottom of the league. Eventually that horrible run ended on a Friday night game at home to Bristol City, where Mel Holden, the man I said that Gary replaced on his debut, Mel Holden scored and Sunderland would beat Bristol City 1-0. After that, the team that couldn't score couldn't stop scoring. They beat Middlesbrough 4-0. The next game, they beat West Brom 6-1. The next game, they beat West Ham 6-0. Gary scored in all of those games. In the West Ham game, he got his first brace and got 2 goals in that game. Come the end of the season, penultimate game of the season, away to Norwich City, Norwich being the club he subsequently joined after leaving Sunderland some years later. It was a crucial game. Sunderland were 2-0 down. They got back to 2-2 with Gary scoring one of the goals. Unfortunately, the season ended with what those of you who were long-term Sunderland supporters will remember was the Coventry City scandal. We'll not go into that now, but nonetheless the team went down. However, by this time, as I said, we played the last 28 of the last 29 games. By this time, Gary was not a figure on the fringes. He wasn't a young lad on the fringes. He'd established himself as a major player, such a major player that in 6 seasons out of the next 7, he was Sunderland's top scorer. The only season he wasn't top scorer was a season where we were promoted in 79-80, when he didn't score at all. He was recovering from a bad injury. But out 6 seasons out of 7, Gary was Sunderland's top scorer. In the first of those seasons, 1977-78, he scored 19 goals. One of them was at Spurs. Obviously, we just played Spurs last weekend. Yesterday, rather. The significance of that was it was his first penalty. And as I'll mention in a few moments, Gary became the best penalty taker in Sunderland's entire history. But that was his first penalty that came that season. The following year, 78-79, he got 21 goals in only 32 games. Sadly, a month after, and I don't need the video just yet, by the way, though I'm going to mention it. Sadly, just a month or so after he scored the hat-trick at Newcastle that helped to make him such a legendary figure at Sunderland, he got a bad injury and was out of action for a long time. At the time, I was a student in Sheffield and a member of the Doncaster branch of the Sunderland Supporters Association. I remember one night in the winter of, it must have been about 78, going along to Bellevue, Doncaster Rovers Old Ground, and seeing Gary playing for Sunderland reserves against Doncaster reserves. And he hit the back of the net for the reserve team. It was the first time he'd scored in about a year. And everybody was absolutely ecstatic that Gary Rowell had scored. And I say everybody, there was only about 80 people at the ground, but 50 of them were Sunderland supporters from the Doncaster branch of the Sunderland Supporters Association. And I remember Doncaster's manager at the time was Billy Bremner, who played against Sunderland's 73 Cup final. I think it might have been one of the most difficult nights of Billy Bremner's life because he didn't half get a lot of stick from those 50 Sunderland supporters in an otherwise empty ground. But Gary went on, as I say, top scorer in 6 seasons out of 7. 82-83, he scored another very famous hat-trick against Arsenal. 3-0 win in December. And then 83-84, the last of the seasons he was top scorer. One of his famous goals was another penalty. It was a penalty at Anfield that beat Liverpool. And Gary remains the last man to score a winning goal for Sunderland away to Liverpool. His last game for Sunderland was on the 23rd of April 1984. It was against West Bromwich Albion at the Hawthorns. In total, he finished with 269 starting appearances for Sunderland and another 28 appearances as sub, 297 in total. And he scored 103 goals. It's a record any striker would be proud of. But as Gary would always tell me, I wasn't really a striker, you know, Rob. I played in midfield. He was an attacking midfielder. That makes that record even more astonishing. He did play up front sometimes, but generally, he was an attacking midfielder. I mentioned earlier, he was the best penalty taker in Sunderland's history. Thankfully, so far this season, Sunderland have scored both of the penalties they've had. Last season, they missed the last 4 out of the 5 that they were given. Gary took 26 penalties for Sunderland and scored 25 of them. There are 2 other footballers in the history of the club who scored more penalties for Sunderland. A great player called Billy Clunas from the 1920s and Jackie Mordew, an England international who played before the First World War. But in terms of ratio of penalties scored to penalties taken, Gary's 96% is way out in front as the best penalty taker the club ever had. Now, I mentioned earlier his famous hat-trick against Newcastle, and in a moment or two we'll actually see it. But I want to read you something from Gary, if you bear with me. Almost 20 years ago I did this book called Match of My Life, where I interviewed a dozen of Sunderland's most famous players and asked them to do exactly what it says on the tin in the title of the book, which was to talk about the match of their life. And obviously in Gary's case, it was clearly that game at Newcastle. And this is Gary's own recollections of that hat-trick at Newcastle, and in particular, the penalty that completed the hat-trick. So he says, after I'd scored the second, believe it or not, I really wasn't thinking about the possibility of a hat-trick. You're still part of a team. You still have a job to do. You can't be too insular. It's more important to win the game. A couple of years earlier, I'd played in a derby game where we were 2-0 up and they came back to draw 2-2. So I'd learned from that not to get too far ahead of myself. We went in at half-time and it was a great feeling. Billy Elliott, who was our long-term caretaker manager at the time, said, don't let them back in. Don't give them a goal. Don't let them back in the game. But of course we did. John Connolly scored, and you just began to wonder, was it going to slip away again? Anyway, we were under pressure for a bit, and I went back into midfield. The crucial moment was when we broke away and got a penalty, when Mickey Henderson was brought down by Kenny Mitchell. Ironically, Kenny was a Sunderland lad. Of course, I was the penalty taker, and I had a reputation for being cool and slotting them in. It was probably the most pressured penalty I ever took in my life when I think about it. I knew if I missed, they'd get a massive psychological boost and they could go on and at least draw the game, because psychology in football is everything. But I knew if I scored, more than it being a hat-trick penalty, I knew if I scored, the game was over. Suddenly, they'd had their spell, but we've scored as I side-footed my penalty to Steve Hardwick's left and recreated the 2-goal lead. A lot of people say I looked really cool taking that penalty, but I was anything but. My stomach was really churning. I just remember looking up as I waited to take the kick and wishing it was in front of the Sunderland fans, but it was in front of the Newcastle fans. Of course, there was all the whistling and booing, and the goal was shrinking before my eyes. Maybe there was extra pressure on me, because I had such a very good penalty record and people expected me to score. To be honest, there was enough pressure on me already, knowing that if I scored, we'd won the game, because they weren't going to come back from 3-1. I thought, if I miss it, the place will go up and I'll be responsible. The pressure was on and I was feeling it. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I held my nerve and put it in. The feeling was one of relief, and it wasn't until I was running back to the halfway line that I realised I'd scored a hat-trick at St James's Park. The penalty was the key moment in the game. It was such a relief for it to go in. Looking back, I'm actually pleased it was in front of the Newcastle fans, because I'd really stuck one up them. For a Sunderland lad. It doesn't get much better than that. And as you know, for Sunderland players and Sunderland supporters, it didn't really get much better than Gary Rowell. If you bear with me, I want to read you one little bit extra from this book from the next page. Because Gary said he felt he was in trouble, he could be in trouble for scoring that hat-trick because of something he'd said after the game. He said, "The game finished. I looked around and the place was empty. The Mags had gone in their droves and the Sunderland fans were celebrating. As moments go, they don't come any better. You've gone and done a job and you've done it better than expected. Fantastic. The sense of elation was incredible and the scenes in the dressing room was if we'd won the cup." I'm in a church now, so when it comes to swear words, you're going to have to use your imagination. And I believe it. Our caretaker manager, Billy Elliott, was great. I love Billy. He's a legend. He played for England. He was a trainer when Sunderland won the FA Cup in 1973. He's been around Sunderland for a long, long time, and I've loads of respect for him. He was delighted. He was always great with me. I have a lot to thank Billy for. I remember after the game, it wasn't like now. Press officers didn't exist then. In one of my last in a long line of interviews, someone said to me, "Gary, would it be fair to say that this means more to you because you hate Newcastle?" And I just said, yeah. I didn't actually say the words, "I hate Newcastle." I just said, yeah. But in some of the morning papers, it was plastered all over the back pages. It's true, but it might not have been the wisest thing I've ever done saying it in public, although actually, I just agreed with someone. Ken Knighton, our coach, came to me the next day. We were in training, and he said, "The gaffer wants to see you in his office." I went in and explained what had happened in a roundabout way. I asked, "Am I in trouble?" Billy said, "No, I love it. I think it's great. Get out there and finish your training." Billy was red and white to the core, but I was really worried when I walked into his office. I was wondering if the FA had said something about all the furore, but I felt even better when I came out. Billy was brilliant. Just as I begin to round off and close up this part of the tribute to Gary Rowell, I want to give you just one or two statistics about his career. I've already mentioned he scored 25 out of 26 penalties, which was phenomenal. 6 of those, by the way, were for fouls committed on Gary himself. Everybody, I think, who knows much about Gary Rowell and knows much about his career knows he was a brilliant penalty taker. But something I think is often overlooked is how many headers he scored. 22 of his goals were headers, and he wasn't a big lad. And as I've said, he often didn't play as a forward, as an attacking midfielder. He had the knack of being in the right place at the right time, coming into the box late from midfield, finding the space, having that sixth sense that brilliant footballers have of knowing where the ball is just going to drop. Think of how many times you've been to the match and thought, if only there was somebody there in the right place at the right time to tap in that loose ball. Gary Rowell was that man. He was the man who knew where the ball would drop. And he was so calm and composed when it came to finishing it off. Only 3 people since the Second World War have scored 100 goals for Sunderland. The great Len Shackleton, the Clown Prince of Soccer, Super Kev himself, Kevin Phillips, and Gary Rowell. 62 of Gary's goals were scored at Roker Park. Since the Second World War, only Len Shackleton, with 66, scored more goals for Sunderland at their phenomenal home of Roker Park. Gary scored more goals against Arsenal than anybody else. He scored 6 goals against Arsenal, including that famous hat-trick. Incidentally, all 3 of his goals against Arsenal on that hat-trick day were all left-footers. Now, I've met and interviewed literally hundreds of Sunderland players in my life. And I've been fortunate enough to become friends with many of them. But I've only ever been starstruck once. And that was with Gary Rowell. And the first 6 times I met Gary Rowell, I met him in a group of people, in the press room when he was doing radio and when he was doing his column in the Echo, and he took his column in the Echo ever so seriously. The lads who used to write his column or work with him on his column in the Echo would say, we'd ring him up and he'd have already written it and would just read it out and it would be pretty much word perfect. As journalists, they didn't have to do anything with it. But the first 6 times I met Gary, I met him within a group of people in press rooms, and I never said a word to him. It was Gary Rowell. On one occasion, I even shared a car with him and a few other people where we dropped him off at some railway station after some away game for him to get back. But once I did get to start to speak to him, I realised that it had been ridiculous for me to be so hesitant and so nervous around Gary, because he just happened to be one of Sunderland's finest goal scorers since the war. He just happened to be Sunderland's best penalty taker ever. But much more importantly than that, he was such a lovely, unassuming, genuine guy. So I knew him from his radio and Echo days. But after he'd finished doing the radio, and even after he'd finished doing the Echo, in the last few years he was coming to the match, I had the privilege of sitting next to Gary at every home game, and many an away game as well, come to that, and realised just how deep his love and his passion for Sunderland went. There's a cliche in football that people will kick every ball when they're not playing. Gary literally was. He couldn't sit still. He was up and at every movement of the game, willing it. And of course, being such a talented footballer, he was thinking ahead of the game. He would be seeing the next 2 or 3 passes before they even happened and telling me what was going to happen. And more often than not, he'd be right. During his illness, Gary wanted that illness to be kept quiet. He didn't want people to know he was so poorly. In fact, he was quite anxious about it. It's a testament to how highly Gary Rowell was thought of by the people who knew him and loved him, that news never came out. And when the news broke of Gary's passing away, it came as such a shock to so many people, because 99.9% of people didn't know Gary was poorly. Over the last 2 or 3 years, when people would say to me, Rob, have you spoken to Gary Rowell recently? I wouldn't tell a lie. I'd just say, oh yeah, and then move the conversation on and switch the conversation pretty quickly before anybody pressed me on it. But a very tight-knit group of friends who knew Gary was poorly kept it very, very quiet, because Gary was so famous and so well thought of that had rumours start to spread he was ill, they would have spread like wildfire and everybody would have known. And Gary's wish to keep that private would have been lost. Just to finish off, I've been asked to speak mainly about Gary's career. So I should mention that he finished his career after leaving Sunderland with spells at Norwich City, Middlesbrough, Brighton, Dundee, Carlisle and Burnley. But of course he was absolutely Sunderland to the core. He was red and white to the core. He never wanted to leave Sunderland. When he did leave Sunderland, he was with Norwich City. And the year after he left Sunderland, Sunderland played Norwich City at Wembley in the League Cup final. Gary wasn't playing, he was injured, he was on crutches. But in one of the most poignant moments I've seen as a Sunderland supporter, as Norwich took the cup around the stadium, the Wembley Stadium, and the Sunderland fans, unlike so many fans who when they lose a cup final are out the stadium straight away, the Sunderland fans stayed sportingly to applaud Norwich. That's why it's known as the friendly final. But Gary took that cup from his Norwich teammates and, holding himself up on one crutch, raised the cup with his other hand towards the Sunderland supporters. He desperately wished he'd done that. Haven't played for Sunderland. He did win international recognition. He made his debut for England under-21s against Finland in 1977. And then in 2020, it was the club's privilege and mine to induct Gary into the Sunderland Hall of Fame. He was so thrilled to bits. One of the reasons he was thrilled to bits was Kevin Phillips was there. Kevin being the only man to have scored more goals for Sunderland since the war than Gary. Gary, you just saw Gary being the fan. He was in awe of Kevin Phillips. And Gary said to me frequently after that, he said, Rob, he says, that night at the Hall of Fame was one of the best nights of my life. He absolutely loved it, and rightly so. Two more things just to say. Firstly, with Gary's impeccable sense of timing, I mentioned earlier his ability to get into the box at just the right time and finish something off. Gary being Gary, he passed away on the night before a derby match. And he remains, as I've said, the last Sunderland player to score a hat-trick against Newcastle. I told he had scored a lot of headers. He had the ability to be just the right place at the right time. When the most expensive goal scorer in Sunderland's history scored the goal in the recent derby match, his own goal, Volta-Marda, I'm giving Gary the assist. I think he was just there willing him on. And the club that day paid ample tribute to Gary Rowell. The song We All Live in a Gary Rowell World we've played before the game. The number one is Gary Rowell, number two is Gary Rowell, number three is Gary Rowell, etc. We're on the LED boards. Nobody needed a lift before that Newcastle game. Everybody was well up for it. But Gary somehow gave everybody that extra lift. And there would have been nobody more proud and more pleased and more delighted than to stick one up the max than Gary. Just lastly, I've talked about things on a very serious level with Gary. Something I've not said, because it's going to be said, I'm sure, by Simon in a few moments, is that one of the things about Gary is there were always such a lot of laughs. He knew how to have a good time. I remember at one game, I think it was somewhere like away to Burnley or Bolton or wherever, we bumped into Frank Worthington, who'd played alongside Gary in Frank Worthington's brief spell at Sunderland. They were absolutely thrilled to bits to see each other, with a mutual admiration. And Frank Worthington, if you know your football, Frank Worthington, while he only played 17 games for Sunderland, was a fabulously skillful and talented player. And it was brilliant to see. They obviously had an awful lot of laughs together. And Simon Crabtree, who's going to speak in a moment, who is genuinely one of the nicest and funniest people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Simon and Gary had so many laughs and so many good times together. But one time that always sticks in my mind was in 2002 in Seville. Sunderland were playing Seville in a pre-season friendly. If I remember rightly, it was a night game. And for some reason, I managed to have Rowell and Crabtree in the back of the car when I'm trying to drive around Seville in the dark, not knowing where I'm going, trying to go back to where the team was staying, trying hard to concentrate on driving on the wrong side of the road. Meanwhile, it's like the Morecambe and Wise show in the back as they tried to put me off. I didn't like it at the time. I was quite cheesed off about it at the time. But now I look back on it with tremendous fondness. And I look back on every time I saw Gary Rowell play football and score a goal with better than tremendous fondness. And more than any of that, I look back with the privilege of getting to know somebody who was, much more importantly than being a famous footballer, a really genuinely lovely guy and one of Sunderland's best ever supporters, never mind players.
And the chance for Rowell, and he's got it. The Sunderland marking is so good, it's impossible for the Newcastle players to get away from their shadows, and now here's Rowell bursting through. And it's another beauty from Gary Rowell. Walker to take the free kick. Sunderland have got 10 men back in defence. Doesn't do them any good, and it's a goal. So Gary Rowell, who scored both goals in the first half, also missed a simple chance in the first half, now gets a wonderful chance to get his hat-trick from the penalty spot. The usual whistling we could do without, and Rowell has made it 3-1. Bob Lee, striker turned midfield player, Rostron, knocking it short to Rowell. It was a good pass that. It was a beauty from Rowell, and there's the fourth goal. What a magnificent piece of work by Gary Rowell. And Gary Rowell takes...
I'm sure you'll all agree that was absolutely amazing by Rob, so thank you so much, Rob. I know it was tough for you. I'm going to ask Simon to come up now. Simon Crabtree.
Thanks, Rob. How'd you follow that? I foolishly listened to Barry Dunn when he said, just wing it, it'll be fine. And then as you were talking, I started making notes, and Mickey's nudging me going, you're just making it worse. And Joanne said, this was Joanne's advice, just tell them something that they don't know. And then I'm sitting here in a house of God thinking, there's not many of the stories that I probably can tell that they don't know in a house of God, or the house of Gary, as many of you would say, including Gary sometimes as well. He knew how good he was. I will correct on the match day programme his birthday. It was June that he was born, not July, although we had that conversation, and we could say he could be like the Queen and have 2 birthdays. He couldn't be the king, obviously, because Charlie's the king, and Gary always used to get so excited when we used to meet up with Charlie Hurley as well, and it'd be like 2 little schoolboys going up, and then it would be the appreciation. And Charlie would go, oh, Gary, you're the greatest player that Sunderland's ever had. And Gary would go, no, Charlie, you are. And then this would go backwards and forwards. No, you are, Gary. No, you are, Charlie. We both are. And off they'd go, and they'd go and make the most of whichever free bar that they could find somewhere in the stadium. And, of course, the Prince was Shaq anyway, wasn't it? So I'm sure Gary wouldn't mind being the Queen, especially if it meant he could have 2 birthday celebrations as well. So what can I tell you about? Well, I'll start by explaining who I am. I worked with Gary. I was lucky enough to work with Gary. I say worked, have fun every single day that we used to be together with Gary on the radio. We started at Sun FM when Steve Mackey would drag him from the shadows, because Gary, as much as he knew he was one of the greatest players to have ever pulled on a football shirt, full stop, in our mind, let alone a Sunderland shirt, he was reticent to be in that spotlight, and Steve phoned him up and persuaded him, with a few quid as well on top of that, to come back into radio. But Gary had gone to a Tranmere game before he came back into the radio, but he'd said he was going to go in the away end, and it was in with the Sunderland fans, but he didn't want to be spotted, so he had a cap on, a scarf across his face, and he was walking up towards the back of the stand. Somebody went, are you Gary Rowell? Yeah, I am, but I'm just trying to keep it in the low down. Don't worry. And as he just sat down in his seat, the guy went, don't worry, Gary lad, I won't tell anyone I've seen you. He turned around, and the entire away end at Tranmere started singing that song that he knows as well. So after Sun FM, when we worked together there, Metro asked me when Guy Mowbray had left to go and be the commentator there. And Eric was leaving Metro at the time, said, is there anyone that you'd like to work with? Fatty will do. I don't know why I called him Fatty Rowell, but he was a beautiful man. But he was just Fatty Rowell from then on, I think, onwards. And our first game, neither of us had commentated on a game before. We'd both told Metro that we'd done commentaries before. We hadn't. We just, like I'm trying to do now, we just winged it. And at the end of the game, there were quite a few people going, who's that idiot commentating with his stupid accent? He's not from round here. He doesn't know anything about Sunderland, but we love Gary. So that was it, the next few games. People wrote in letters in those days. One of them, after the game was at Luton in the League Cup, wrote a letter wishing that I died in a car crash on the way home from my next commentary game, which was much to the amusement of Gary, because he said, well, if you do that, I'll share a car with somebody else. But we bought, after that game as well, we bought a huge plate of sandwiches like the one in Father Ted. And he said, right, we're trying to be commentators and we're not commentators. So let's just be like you and me commentating. I always used to pick Gary up from his mum and dad's house in Herrington. And we'd go in, we'd have a lovely chat with his mum and dad, who adopted me as their son. So Gary was my big brother. And Pete and Chris, his kids, became my little brother, which was a bit weird if he was my brother and his kids were my little brother. He did live in Burnley for a while, so I'll probably get away with that. So that was what we did. We were fans who were privileged enough to sit in the seats. And then there was one day when I picked him up for a game across, I can't even say the name, you know which game I'm talking about, but it was swearing, and I'm not going to swear in the house of God. But we went across there, and as we got in the car, he went, I hate this, hate them. So to try and take his mind off it, we spoke about their famous game against Norway when England beat them and it ended. Clement Attlee, Winston Churchill, Maggie Thatcher. And in terms of why I remembered that one, because a few weeks earlier, when me and Gary used to go for nights out, and Sweet Barry Dunn, who was going to get up and talk next, who was always the butt of everybody's jokes. Gary used to just disappear halfway through a night, and he would leave me in the middle of Burnley or Colne or whichever town was when he used to say it. And he'd disappear, and you'd go, I have no idea what his address is, I have no idea how to get. So you get in a taxi and you go, I want you to take me to a house. I know there's a big hill and 2 pubs. No idea. There's a speedboat that somebody won on Bullseye. We know exactly where you live, yeah. And as you'd get there, you know, Gary Rowell lives around here somewhere as well. Then, even when he was at Burnley, everybody knew who Gary Rowell was. But anyway, Gary was always the inspiration for us as fans, for me working on the wireless as well, that game. And it reminds me of another moment where at the start of our career, I know I'm going all over the place now, I knew I should have written stuff down, like Rob. But we were doing a commentary and trying to be commentators. And I'd said, I think it was John Oster, had played a ball. I was either trying to say down the channel or down the flank. And all I could say was down the chank. And then he looked at me. Said, no, down the chank. And that's all I could, 3 times down the chank. So what are you talking about? I said, well, it's I think I'm trying to say either a channel or a flank. He said, you mean a flannel? So I knew where I stood from Gary Fenner. So it was just always having fun. Always having fun. And I'm trying to tell you stories that I can tell here. And I remember when we had an away game, part of the away game was always, see if you can get us a stopover as well. Didn't matter where we were. Burnley was pushing it. Anywhere south of Manchester we could generally get away with, but we'd always have a night out. I remember, I think it was in Plymouth, and turned around and Gary was drinking out of someone's false leg that had been filled up with beer. And looking at Rob as well, Chelsea brings back memories. So at Chelsea at the end of the game, it was 4-2, Rob. It was a brilliant win for us, and we battered Chelsea. And the old commentary box was underneath their main stand, and the away fans were just there, separated by some weird perspex piece of glass. And they were coming away, and we were laughing our heads. We nearly killed Mark Bright because we'd sellotaped our effects mic to the ceiling, and it came off halfway through the game and swung like a pendulum. And Mark Bright had to move right away from killing, which set the tone. But as the fans were all going out, and as you can imagine, we're all jovial, and they saw Gary. Gary, man, way! So of course they all start singing, number 1. Yeah. So I'm conducting them now, number 2. Going, and I turned around and everybody's laughing, the fans are banging on the thing, they're all coming over. And a steward starts running up because he thinks something's going on. and then 10 stewards followed him, and then 20 police officers followed them, and the chief superintendent PC plod person followed them as well. They're all running up, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh, and we're on air at this point. And the steward came off first, and I can't use the words he used. He's like, "Are you mad? You're causing a riot." I went, "They're our fans. They're happy. They're all right. They're fine." And then I turned around, and then there's three, however many stripes you have when you're really important. Said, "I think I need a word with you, son." I said, "Yeah, we're just on air at the moment. Give me a moment now." So I had to take my headphones off. So we're back in just a moment on Metro Radio. And I turned around, and he started giving me the almighty rollicking. And we turn around, and Gary's there, and he's got a glass in his hand and it's got a vodka and coke in it. And the policeman turned around and went, "Where have you got that from?" I went, "What is it?" He said, "Vodka and coke, I think." I said, "Where did you get that?" "It was you, wasn't it?" And it was at that moment that the copper said, "Yeah, you're going to have to pack up and go now." And everybody back in the northeast thought we'd been arrested and sent to prison. And it wasn't until I think in the Echo on the Monday that we did. But it was always that. It was always fun. I don't remember that time in Seville that we did it. But I will end by saying this, because I know I'm just wittering now, because I could talk for hours and hours about all the fun that I had with Gary, but I'm trying to also only tell you the ones that I know. There was nothing bad, by the way, but it was just, as I say, it was usually involved alcohol and taking Mickey out of Sweet Barry. I will tell you a story about Barry Dunn in Plymouth. We managed to get Gary on away game in Plymouth, and we hammered him all weekend. I can't tell you most of the stories about him, but he's called Sweet Barry Dunn because of that. And when we got to the train station to go home, do you remember this story, Rob? Barry had his little hold all, and we sent him off to get a newspaper and a cup of tea. And then when he came back, he picked up his bag, and you could see the look of puzzlement on his face. Got on the train, put his bag on the train. He hadn't realised that me and Gary, there was a big fountain at Plymouth outside the railway station with loads of big stones. Half of those stones were in Barry's bag. And we just used to giggle like schoolboys, like meeting Brian Clough at Nottingham Forest. And Gary was in awe of them. But more than anything about Gary, of his love, there's only one thing in his life that he probably loved as much as some, and that was his family as well. And I know that Chris and Peter would have loved to have been here today. But the funeral, I don't think they could do it twice, but they do send their love and their thoughts, and little Lucy as well, Pete's little lad who Gary absolutely adored. And as Rob said, he didn't want anybody to know he was ill. He didn't want anybody to know he was a footballer half the time, but he absolutely loved being from Sunderland, playing from Sunderland, and being there one night. And I will tell this story, I'll apologise now. But we were in Brogan's, and he was just being adulated by, is that a word? By everyone in there. And this bloke moved to me like, "What's going on?" I went, "There was a time when every single woman in this place would have wanted taking Gary home to bed." He went, "About that time as well, every single bloke in here did as well, man." And with that, I will just say, I have brought a team sheet. This is the only thing that I prepared as I came here. And it is from, again, down the road at their place. And I'll just read out, just to sort of give you an idea, when Gary was everybody's hero, the sort of company that he kept. So I'll read out the team sheet, if I may, in terms of that. So it says, number 1 is Gary Rowell. Number 2 is Gary Rowell. Number 3 you can join in if you want. Number 4 is Gary Rowell. Number 5 is Gary Rowell. Number 6 is Gary Rowell. Number 7 is Gary Rowell. Number 8 is Gary Rowell. Number 9 is Gary Rowell. Number 10 is Gary Rowell. Number 11 is Gary Rowell. Number 12 is Gary Rowell. We all live in a Gary Rowell world, a Gary Rowell world, a Gary Rowell world. We all live in a Gary Rowell world, a Gary Rowell world, a Gary Rowell world. We can't believe he's gone. He'll always be there. Hopefully he'll always be in your hearts as well. Please welcome up to the microphone now another one of his bestest friends who also has stories that he could never tell up here, but he's going to share some of them anyway. Sweet Barry Dunn.
Good evening, everybody, and wish you all a happy new year. I'm going to be short and sweet, not like these people. I'd like to thank Joanne and everybody involved in today, tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel very proud. And basically, I just want to short and sweet. I had the honour to carry Gary down at Burnley, but also to be with a man from the terraces who I idolised, to end up being his best roommate on a football pitch. And I just want to tell one little story, going into it more fun and that, get away from it, because it still hurts. My first game, I went from amateur football to professional football and ended up on the bench at Rowell Park against Preston, and could not believe it. Bring Gary Rowell off for me to go on, and that made my lifetime. Got that out of the way, and it goes into, we play Luton Town away. Travel down to Luton on a Friday night. I'm only rooming with the number one. So he gets us a meal, lovely meal in a hotel, goes up to the room, twin rooms. It wasn't a double bed, it was a twin room. I wish it had been a double bedroom. It didn't get that far, but anyhow, gets in there, gets settled. My first time, I probably got my pink pyjamas on, and he's like Mr. Cool, as he was. And we get settled, TV's on. Sorry, the TV wasn't on. And he went, Dunny, put the TV on. And I went, well, there'd be a remote, Gary, in a hotel. He went, I've looked, there's not one anywhere. So I gets up, puts the TV on. We're watching this programme for about half an hour at the most. And he went, oh, shit, this Dunny, turn it over. So, sorry, God. So I gets up, out my bed again, turns it over. An hour later, he went, I think I've had enough, we'll turn it in. I said, I'll turn it off, Gary, no problems. He went, no, I will. I'm going to finish on that note. God rest us.
Thank you. So we've reflected on a life well lived, and that's why we have heavy hearts. That's why we have grief, but we also have so much love. And we gather to say our final goodbyes to a man whose life has touched so many of us. Gary Rowell was not just a player for Sunderland. He was and will forever be part of the Sunderland family. Today, as we remember him, we do so not only as fans, but as a community with deep appreciation that he shared his gifts and talents with us for 12 years. 12 years, a very, very long time in professional football. Between 72 and 84, he put on our colours and inspired us with his skill, his work ethic, and his unyielding love for the game, which made him a cult-like hero here on Wearside. Every football club is special to its fans, obviously, but we know that Sunderland Football Club holds a unique place in the heart of its fans and in the history of English football. And what makes it so special is a combination of our history, our passion, our community, and our resilience. We have the most passionate and dedicated fans in the country. which includes all of you here tonight. We have a rich footballing history that stretches back over 140 years. We have a stadium that is a fortress. We have a great squad now and coaching staff, and a very ambitious, progressive leadership team now. In short, we have all the ingredients of success recently. And Gary has been able to see that. But the most important ingredient of success is the sense of family that we have. Rather than just a fan base, we are a family. From the players, the coaching staff, former players, all of us here, there's a real sense of unity that binds us all together. Once a Mackin, always a Mackin. Once you're part of Sunderland, you're always part of Sunderland, no matter where life takes you. This family atmosphere makes Sunderland more than just a football club. We're a community, we're a family, we're a way of life for those who support it. Gary bought into this massively. He understood this sense of community. He understood this family. He lived it, he breathed it, and he went out to battle for it. Gary was part of all of us, and his spirit will remain with us, woven into the very fabric of our club. As we reflect on Gary's life tonight, we are reminded of the passion he brought to the pitch, his commitment, his determination, and the love he had for the game and the club that he represented. But his legacy is not limited to the goals he scored or the matches he played. It extends far beyond the field into the hearts of all those who were fortunate enough to know him, to watch him, and to those that call him a close friend. Of course, to us in the Sunderland family, he's a hero. But to his family, particularly his sons, he's so much more. He's someone who has been with them every step of their lives, showering them with love and support no matter what. So we enfold Chris and Peter, Gary's sons, and Lucy, who he was immensely proud of. We enfold them into our hearts and our love tonight. Not just today, but always, because he's always part of our family, and so are they. I know they're watching. So from your Sunderland family, we want to say a very big thank you to you for sharing your lovely dad with us here in our club. Gary's battle with leukemia was, as we've heard, a private one, but one of incredible bravery. Those who saw him during this time witnessed a strength that was beyond what any game could demand. He fought with dignity, with courage, and with a resilience that left people in awe. He never let his illness define him. Even as he faced challenges, Gary's love for his family, for his friends, and for Sunderland remained constant. His fight was a testament to the human spirit, to the unwavering belief that love, hope, and faith carry us through the darkest of times. Tonight, we say goodbye to Gary. We also take comfort in knowing that he is now free from any pain, free from any harm, now at peace in heaven. His suffering has ended, and he is reunited with all those who have gone before him. Though our hearts may ache with loss, we are reminded that his journey doesn't end here. His spirit lives on in our memories and in our family's heart, and in the legacy of all he was. Loving father, devoted friend, a cherished teammate, and a true Sunderland hero. As we step into this new year, let us carry Gary with us. Let us hold him in our hearts as we face the days ahead, remembering not only the man he was, but the love that he gave to all of us. As we move forward, let us do so with the same strength and the same courage and the same joy that Gary brought to every game he played. Let us be inspired by his spirit, his kindness, and his enduring love for his family. Gary's journey may have come to an end on this earth, but his memory, his love, his legacy will continue to shine brightly. We will always remember him with love and affection, and he will always be part of our Sunderland family. I'm going to listen to a piece of music which is very special to us as a family as we remember Gary with love and affection. Thank you. Just to finish then, just to say a big thank you to the great and the good, the bad and the ugly. It's a great tribute to the man to see on an awful night outside with the weather that so many have turned out. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the Minster for facilitating us and welcoming us as always. Thank you to Joanne and Heaven Branch for all their hard work that they do, and our terrific speakers for giving us an insight into Gary's life. And thank you to everyone who's played a part, and of course thanks to Gary's family, who we keep in our thoughts and prayers. Just before we finish then, we just have a final prayer. We ask the Lord's blessing to come upon all of us, to comfort us and to renew us. We give thanks to the Lord that we belong to this family, that we'll always be here to support one another. And may the Lord bless you and all the people you love. If you are sad, may you be comforted. May the Lord wipe away every tear from your cheek and give you comfort in the promise that Gary now enjoys eternal life. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Amen. Thank you very much.